Ladies and gentlemen, John Kerry recently said that, I quote, "The climate crisis puts young people today at the losing end of perhaps the greatest abdication of generational responsibility in history." And certainly that is the perspective that we just heard from those two young climate activists. So let us return now to the topic of what we can do at diplomatic, multilateral level to change that, and in particular through renewed transatlantic cooperation. Our next panel discussion is entitled Game On for Transatlantic Renewable Aspirations, and that title, ladies and gentlemen, clearly references the fact that, as Joe Biden has put it often, America is back when it comes to climate policy. As we've been reminded several times over the course of the day, one of President Biden's first actions was to rejoin the Paris Agreement. And in fact, new momentum is also being driven by energy partnerships like the one launched right here at BETD between the German government and Canada. So can we rebuild and widen the transatlantic climate bridge that was established back in 2008 and make it truly durable and effective in what has become a race against time? We want to talk about the opportunities, but also the challenges and the priorities for how we move forward. And we have a great panel to address all of those subjects. I am going to ask our audience to very quickly go on to Slido and answer our first Mentimeter question, our first audience poll for us. You'll see that if you are a registered user, you will see it on your screens under the Slido window. And if you'll just go on there and answer that question, then we'll come back to it shortly after we've introduced all of our speakers. And now it's my pleasure to tell you about our speakers. And I'm going to keep our intros very, very brief in order to maximize our time for discussion, because we do have a very compact window here. I begin with the European Union Commissioner for Energy, Kadri Simson. Great to have you with us. Welcome. Also rejoining us again is the U.S. Presidential Envoy for Climate, former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. Great that you could stay on for the panel. Canada's Minister of Natural Resources is with us, Seamus O'Regan. Also with us, the Foreign Minister of Italy, Luigi Di Maio, and Germany's Federal Minister for Economic Affairs and Energy, Peter Altmaier, who spoke with us earlier today, is with us once again, now back in his office, joining us virtually. And let me ask our technicians whether we can now, in fact, get that audience poll up on the screen so all of our speakers also get a quick chance to look at it. So we had asked, given the transatlantic renewable aspirations, which sector would you personally invest money in? And wow, far and away, the biggest share, they are saying green hydrogen. We also see offshore wind there, battery storage. In fact, John Kerry mentioned the battery plant being built right now here outside of Berlin as a transatlantic endeavor, that being, of course, Tesla that is doing that investment. Electric mobility also here, solar, wave energy, storage. So just a few terms there from our audience. Thank you very much for that. Now, I would like to begin our interactive discussion, dear speakers, and as I said, we're on a terribly tight schedule, so I'm going to request that you really try to give us statements that are 3 minutes or under. And I'll begin with an opening impulse from our host, Peter Altmaier. Please.
Yes, hello everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm really delighted to welcome such a distinguished panel today, and I was delighted and inspired by John Kerry's speech just a couple of minutes ago. It was a clear sign of commitment and leadership, and we need and we deserve that leadership, because we are all now in a situation where depression has been replaced by hope, where the doubt has been replaced by the willingness for action, but the window of opportunity is very small. When we had to cancel the Berlin Energy Transit Day in a physical presence half a year ago as a consequence of COVID-19, we all were saddened and somehow depressed. Now, I must say, I'm very happy and relieved that so many thousand people around the globe can follow our discussions. Young people, people from all generations, people in developing countries, emerging countries, and industrialized countries. And we have to prove our ability, our willingness to deliver. John Kerry has made it clear in his keynote. We have a little bit more than half a year to accomplish all the necessary decision-making in order to guarantee a successful COP meeting in Glasgow. And this is important. We have the Americans back. We have lots of industrialized countries that have signed commitments to achieve climate neutrality by 2050 at the latest. We have the Green Deal of the European Union. When it was decided, Europe seemed to be a very strange animal. It seemed to be a very isolated approach. Now it is followed by so many others. And this gives us an opportunity to make this energy transition, this climate protection, cheaper as it otherwise would be, to make it faster as it otherwise would be. And it means we have to enhance cooperation. All the keywords that have been mentioned by Melinda are so enormously important. Energy transition is a systemic challenge, and we have to develop the renewable energies. We have to phase out of coal and fossil fuels as soon as possible. We have to make sure that sector coupling is achieved between the different sectors where energy consumption takes place. In Germany, indeed, we have played a role in inspiring the use of renewable energies by providing high feed-in tariffs. That was extremely expensive. But today, renewable energies have become competitive in many countries and in many areas. When I was appointed Secretary of the Environment in Germany 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, solar energy was above 10 euro cent per kilowatt hour, and today it is below 4. And we see solar parks now being realized without any feed-in tariffs at all. That is what we have achieved. We have to share our experience. We have to benefit from cooperation. And I see with enormous hope all the new initiatives to promote hydrogen solutions. Hydrogen is a kind of missing link. It's a missing link because when you want to stay competitive, when you want to transform your industries, when you want to produce green steel, green chemistry, green metals, and other products, then you need hydrogen. Green hydrogen produced from renewable energies to make that happen. We know that we can, perhaps by 2035, produce green steel. We know that we can produce green products in many areas. And we have seen now the momentum gaining place. Momentum that is inspiring companies, private businesses, to undergo their own transformation. We have to make sure that renewable energy remains available at affordable prices. We have to make sure, and we have to prove, as industrialized countries, that we can demonstrate that prosperity, competitiveness, and climate action are compatible, so that other countries, also developing countries and the poorest countries, will follow our example and benefit from that. That is a challenge. John Kerry has underlined and stressed how important it is to act quickly. And indeed, after 30 years of enormous efforts, we have realized we have harvested the low-hanging fruits, many of them, but we still are much too slow and much too late if we want to achieve our ambitious targets. And therefore, we cannot further delay. We have to use the next decade to achieve important progress and to tell the investors this is not a hype. This is something that is becoming the basic policy in all our countries. Therefore, I'm so delighted to see this transatlantic panel. If we can provide leadership together, if we can join forces, if we can convince countries like Japan, South Korea, China, and many, many others to follow, then we will make a difference. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you very much, Minister Altmaier. In just a moment, we want to drill a little bit deeper on how we triangulate prosperity, climate action, and competitiveness. But first of all, I would like to get a second input for our discussion. As this year's G20 president, Italy has a crucial role in coordinating climate action in the run-up to the COP26. So let me go now to the Italian minister, Mr. Di Maio. Please, a brief input, if you would.
Thank you, Dr. Crane, and I thank also the organizer of the Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue 2021 for the invitation. I'm very glad to attend such a prestigious forum and share with you some insights from Italy on the topics of this panel. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that I will not be able to stay for the Q&A as I have to leave soon after my opening remarks because of unexpected parliamentary business, but I'm very sorry for that. My dear colleagues and dear youth representatives, dear John Kerry, today we have been discussing the prospects of transatlantic renewable aspiration in the fight against climate change. We should rather call it climate twisting, because it has to be clear-cut how heavy and damaging climate changes have been for the last century and a half. Earth's climate has changed many times throughout history as a consequence of natural processes. However, we cannot accept that human civilization at current stage of advanced technology and development is mainly responsible for ravaging it. Therefore, I would like to start by focusing on the value of transatlantic cooperation in this fight. The first factor is the transatlantic carbon footprint. According to the International Energy Agency in 2019, before the COVID-19 shock, world CO2 emissions amounted to 33 gigatons. Altogether, Europe, the United States, Canada, and their main partners, such as Japan, Republic of Korea, and Australia, are home to almost 1/7 of the world population. However, their emissions still accounted for more than 1/3 of the total. The good news is that in the past 2 years, these countries had a decline in CO2 emissions from the power sector. This is due mainly to the increasing role of renewable sources and fuel switching from coal to natural gas. Second, in the transatlantic community, we have the best technology to achieve environmental sustainability and carbon neutrality. What we need now is to push for more green financing and administrative simplification to incentivize and spread its application. On green financing, the EU has been the world frontrunner as the largest issuer of green bonds worldwide. At the last World Economic Forum, it has been said that moving toward an environmental sustainable economy by 2050 would represent a 40 trillion euro investment opportunity. It's important to mobilize the private sector, banks, and other financial institutions. And I'm confident that they will be part of this global effort, not only because fighting against the climate twisting is the right thing to do, but also because it is profitable. On administrative simplification, it is time to cut the red tape of excessive bureaucracy hindering too many good projects, including our renewables. Energy efficiency will not be possible without administrative efficiency. That is the kind of reform the new Italian government has been working hard on. Third, the most relevant of our resources is awareness of the importance of our common values. In the last few months, the EU member states agreed to devote more than 1/3 of their recovery plan after COVID-19 to the European Green Deal. The US rejoined the Paris Agreement. Canada passed its Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act. The UK introduced a 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution. It seems we have again a clear convergence trend, and I do believe that this is a good news for all. Fourth, as the most influential community of powers, the transatlantic community has to exercise its multilateral leadership in setting the global agenda against the climate change. This challenge calls on the engagement of all countries. We do have to engage them, but I think our community still has the best solutions and the strongest political will to be the standard maker in the green transition era. The energy transition is our test bed. We have to work on the essential drivers to step up renewables. Cooperation in sci-tech research, industrial alliances, good energy governance, common standards and profitability. I'm convinced that there is no better coalition than the transatlantic community in order to leverage all these drivers in the most effective way. Italy is ready to give its contribution. We have leading global companies in the energy sector, an extensive research network, and good relations with many partners in the MENA region, in the Western Balkans, in Africa, and other areas as well. This year, Italy will hold the G20 presidency, and we will host the Youth for Climate event and the Pre-COP26. Furthermore, in the same spirit, the new Italian government has created a new Ministry for Environmental Transition. As such, we feel a special responsibility in keeping the momentum high on the global coordination efforts towards a zero-carbon economy and an effective green transition. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your invitation.
Thank you very much, Foreign Minister Di Maio, and we're sorry that you won't be able to stay for the rest of the panel, but of course we do understand and we wish you a great deal of success as G20 president. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me now move on to get our panelists' take, and as I said, this session is entitled Game On, but in fact we've heard speaker after speaker today that say that we must up our game, so I'd like to talk about that now, and I'd like to ask very specifically for the three panelists who haven't spoken yet to tell us what you see as the most important steps that the transatlantic partners can take to really up our game, to accelerate climate action now in the run-up to the COP and of course thereafter as well. So I'll start with the EU Energy Commissioner, Kadri Simpson, please. And if you would, I know it's hard, but 2 minutes if you can, because we still want to get in another round of questions after this. Thank you.
Good afternoon from Brussels, and I do my best, but this is a mission impossible. I wanted to start by stating that I am a true believer in transatlantic relations. As partners, we need three things to accelerate the green transition: direction, momentum, and a vehicle. The direction will be brought about by leadership on both sides of the Atlantic, and I'm very happy to see that the United States is back and Canada has been our continued ally. So last week, we welcomed John Kerry to the college. And John, when I was listening to you, I was struck by how your goals echoed our own. So it's clear that on both sides of the Atlantic, we are eager to bring that leadership to the table. And in Europe, we plan to reach climate neutrality by 2050. Building on this direction, we need momentum, and in 2020 we hit the ground running. So we launched the strategies on hydrogen, offshore renewable energy, methane emissions, and for kicking off a renovation wave for buildings. And right now we are working on concrete legislative proposals for reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030, with a focus on energy efficiency and renewables, including hydrogen. So international cooperation will be important for renewable hydrogen. Our best chance of scaling this innovative fuel is to jointly propose a global rules-based market for hydrogen with harmonized safety and environmental standards. Accelerating the momentum also in methane reductions. A large part of leaks can be reduced at net zero cost. And in the EU, we are putting in place better monitoring and reporting, leak detection and repair, but we are also promoting global cooperation. So we support the renewed oil and gas methane partnership and the establishment of an international methane emissions observatory in cooperation with the United Nations Environment Programme and the International Energy Agency. And finally, after the direction, the momentum is in place, we need a vehicle, a funding vehicle, and the increased ambition requires significant increases in investment. So we estimate that we need to increase investment by around 350 billion euros per year compared to the past decade. These are huge numbers, but I'm confident we will get there because also our leaders have agreed on the largest budget in history. This is 1.8 trillion euros, and at least 30% of this will be dedicated to climate mainstreaming. So this is our occasion to build back better after the devastating effects of the pandemic. And at the same time, public funding can only be part of the solution. We are finalizing our rules to guide private capital towards sustainable investments. And overall, as partners, we need to lead with purpose, giving the momentum and the financial firepower to back up our ambitions. And I'm very confident from what I have seen of our transatlantic partners that we will achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And in fact, you achieved that mission impossible pretty impressively. Let me go on now to Canadian Minister O'Regan. Same question, main drivers to really accelerate our climate action transatlantically.
Dr. Shin, Dr. Crane, first of all, let me just take a moment to thank Secretary in the United States for not only re-engaging on climate action, but being bold and unapologetic about it. I recently attended, as did he just 2 weeks ago, a joint meeting of our cabinets with our Prime Minister and President Biden. I can tell you, as somebody who was a board member of the World Wildlife Fund of Canada, I've traveled to Antarctica to see the effects of climate change on our polar regions. We know here in Canada, the Inuit tell us how dramatically their lands are changing in our north. To be in that meeting was a day I did not think would come soon. To have the United States not only back talking about climate change, no longer omitting the words climate change from our joint communiques, but insisting they be in there. And the sense of urgency that this president and Secretary Kerry and their cabinet feel is inspiring. And I think it's very important that sentiment, that it's understood how important that is. We really do have a chance of upping our game now. We have a chance of doing this. We have a chance of meeting our Paris targets. I'm broadcasting to you from Newfoundland, which is the furthest east part of Canada, halfway between Europe, actually, and Toronto and Ottawa and Montreal, the centers of our country. We're out in the middle of the North Atlantic. We have seen one environmental crisis here only 30 years ago that saw our northern cod species gone after one generation of industrial fishery. The biggest single source of protein in the world. It's oil now that we depend on. And of course, as any oil-producing jurisdiction in the country knows, it has been one heck of a year. The transition that is happening, the movement towards lower emissions in the marketplace is happening. It is happening and it is real. And it is jurisdictions like mine that without proper guidance and without the proper investments in our workers and jurisdictions like mine, like Alberta, like Saskatchewan in my country, then without inclusion, if you ask me to make a single point here, Dr. Crane, without inclusion, this momentum will not be maintained. People need and want to be included. Our energy workers here in this country, out in Alberta and Saskatchewan, in 2 generations figured out how to get oil out of sand and make us the 4th biggest producers of oil and gas in the world. And what I say to them is that we need that same ingenuity and determination and work ethic now to lower emissions. And that is not easy, and it will not happen on its own. The marketplace is driving investment, no question, but it is up to governments like ours and leadership like I see before me to make sure that that happens. Only this morning at the International Energy Agency, we had our first meeting of a global commission of a people-centered recovery. It's all about inclusion. Christina Figueres was there, of course, and we really feel as governments that we need to ensure that no one is left out of this moment, to ensure we maintain this momentum, and to ensure that the people that we need in order to make this transition, because it's a lot of complex engineering and a lot of hard work, that we don't lose them. I would say that that is one of the biggest imperatives of our government. And I can tell you, having spoken to those on this panel, and it was abundantly clear from Secretary Kerry and from President Biden, they get it. They know. They are working with the unions and with the energy jurisdictions in their own country to make sure that we got everybody on board.
Thank you so much. And in fact, we're going to drill a little bit deeper on that in just a moment. But let me first also give John Kerry an opportunity to respond in terms of what you see. You told us, of course, some of this in your keynote, but maybe you want to reinforce the message by just telling us 1 or 2 drivers that you would say are the absolute most crucial prerequisites to truly accelerating our climate action transatlantically.
Thank you so much, Melinda. I appreciate it. And thank you, Seamus, for your great comments, and most importantly, for Canada's terrific partnership. It's terrific to be back at the table with you and to be cooperating together. The key things that we need to do. Number one, we have to get certainly the 20 largest emitting countries, but hopefully all nations that come to Glasgow will raise ambition and particularly set an NDC, national defined contribution by them in the reduction of emissions at a level that will allow us to keep the 1.5 degrees centigrade Celsius alive. That's critical. We must have the statement of ambition, the agreement that we're going to move there. We need the transparency and accountability that will then follow that in order to guarantee that people are really following through and it's not a greenwashing or a phony statement and walk away. This is for real. And the nations have to step up as if it is. The second thing, it would help a great deal if we had, there's not consensus on this yet, a carbon market. Global carbon market would be the best thing. But in the absence of that, we need to create a sufficient market so the price of carbon comes up by the marketplace reacting to it. And indeed, you'll see choices starting to be made that will be common sense, and business will make a huge difference. I believe the private sector is absolutely key to our ability to meet this goal. No government is going to have enough money, and no government by itself can make it happen fast enough. The private sector will drive much of what happens in terms of innovation and research. And we need to harness that energy. There's no shame in that. We need to do that in the best ways that we can allocate capital, harness the power of that capital. And so finance, I've created within our team in Washington, a finance team, and bringing expert capacity to the table so we could help work with the international financial institutions, the World Bank, the IMF, the development banks around the world, come together, create new financial instruments, conceivably, that are leveraging investment in revenue-producing endeavors. For instance, transportation, revenue-producing, energy production, power production, revenue-producing. Where it is revenue-producing, it can be financeable within the marketplace, and that can bring trillions of dollars to the table. Third thing we need is a massive global cooperative effort to break the barrier of discovery, of innovation, of new technologies. We will need, even if we got to net 50, even if we got to 2050 with net zero, we're still going to need to suck carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And we need the technologies moving. Direct air capture, carbon storage. I mean, different things. It's not per se the fossil fuel. It's the product, the byproduct of fossil fuel. And if that byproduct obviously was completely contained, then you have what's called, abated versus unabated emissions. To do that may accelerate our capacity to be able to get done what we need to do in this next 10 years. Ultimately, we got to move to the new energy, to hydrogen. I was delighted to see hydrogen in that big, bold letters there, because I think hydrogen is perhaps one of our greatest opportunities, as obviously that's a shared point of view. Whole economies can be built on it. And by the way, some of the infrastructure that already exists in fossil fuel industry can also be used to deal with some of that aspect. So I think those are the most critical things. Countries must make this decade, 2020 to 2030, it's imperative that we do what's necessary to get on the right curve. Those are the most critical things in my mind.
Thank you so much for that. So I'd like to do one more round of quick questions and answers and dig deeper on the point that was made by Seamus O'Regan in terms of inclusion. We had another word cloud earlier today where climate justice was the biggest writing in the very center of the diagram. So let me ask all of you about how we triangulate climate action with justice and inclusion. And I'll start with Peter Altmaier and ask you to talk a little bit. You mentioned it yourself. How do we stay competitive, get active on climate, and take people along? And John Kerry, in his keynote, commended Germany's tough decisions on coal, and yet many climate activists would say they're still too slow. So how do you see the triangulation of these goals?
First of all, it is important to taking decisions. And when we have taken the decision of phasing out of fossil coal and electricity, we were blamed for being too late. But now we are seeing it's going much faster. And the second point is the triangulation you mentioned. That means we as industrialized countries, we have to provide the business models that can help developing countries, poorer countries, to benefit from energy transition and climate protection. I have two examples for that. The first example is offshore wind energy. We have developed offshore wind energy in countries like Germany that it can, on a medium-term perspective, produce at zero additional cost enormous amounts of electricity, of renewable electricity. When you look at the coastal waters around the world, there is an enormous potential for the installation of new offshore wind capacities. And that would benefit the developing countries enormously, because they have a lack of electrification and electricity. They rely on fossil electricity much more than other countries, and therefore this is example number one. Second example is the matter of hydrogen. It was mentioned by everybody. Green hydrogen can help us in many respects. But the industrialized countries, the densely populated areas, quite often have not the space enough to produce green hydrogen for the domestic purposes. Germany is still importing about 70% of its primary energy demand, and we are ready to import. That means that oil and gas producing countries can substitute their fossil production progressively by the production of green hydrogen. And developing countries can have a business model by producing green hydrogen. And this is something that is possible. And the last point is when we are talking about electromobility, where Tesla, John Kerry has mentioned that, thank you for that, is an American company, now the biggest in terms of value in the world, world, but it's becoming an American-German company as well. They are investing in a battery factory. They are investing in a gigafactory for e-cars. My idea is that on a medium-term perspective, e-cars are becoming even cheaper than combusting cars, and batteries are becoming much cheaper than they are today. And this will help also the developing and the poorer countries to benefit from transport and individual e-mobility. These are three examples, I think, that we should deepen in the next years.
Thank you very much. And let me go now to Minister O'Regan and ask you to talk a bit about jobs. Canada, of course, is following a two-track approach on energy. You do still invest significantly in the fossil fuels sector, and you talked about Canada's innovation in that area. What do you reply to critics who say that slows down the energy transition?
Not at all. In fact, Minister Altmaier and I had a very frank conversation about being very practical people. This is happening. I think the transition, the energy transition that we speak of and lowering emissions is happening, which means it is not always a neat and tidy business. It is a false choice to say that we have to choose between the perfect and the good, or the perfect gets in the way of the good. We need the perfect and the good. We need everything in our quest to lower emissions. We are not going to get oil-free overnight by any stretch of the imagination. So in the meantime, we have to do the hard work of lowering the emissions involved with the extraction and use of oil. And that comes back to people. This is not, again, it's not a false choice to say that, you know, when you're looking after people in these energy sectors, that you're in any way slowing down or subsidizing the present. Not at all. This is not an act of charity. These are the people that we need to do the hard work. You know, when I spoke to the head of the crane operators union in Alberta when I first got this job, he said to me, you know, we don't care whether our cranes are lifting a wind turbine or a pipeline. Good work is good work. When I speak to unions, they say, look, we are used to retooling in this industry. We need to know what we are retooling to. So when we had the pandemic hit and the demand destruction hit our country and the oil go into negative value per barrel, what did we do very quickly? We invested $1.7 billion in looking after orphan and inactive wells. It's a highly technical thing where you're taking orphaned and abandoned oil wells and you're capping them, you're repurposing them, you are cutting back on methane emissions. This was something that we knew we could do very quickly because we need to get to where is next. You know, we've been using sports metaphors on Game On, and I would add one in our ice hockey mad country from the father of one of our greatest players, Wayne Gretzky, Walter Gretzky, who just passed away recently. And he said, you don't skate to where the puck is. You skate to where the puck is going. Mm-hmm. That is something that we had not seen markets move on. They are moving on that now. It has been a sea change over the course of this pandemic, an accelerant on trends that we knew existed. The market is moving very quickly, but it is incumbent upon governments to make sure that people are not left behind, not only because that's the right and proper thing to do and what governments should be doing, but again, because this is not an act of charity. These are the experienced, intelligent, educated men and women who've shown a lot of ingenuity in traditional areas of energy, and we need to reposition them now to lowering emissions wherever and whenever we can. Back to the point of your audience and the word cloud. In fact, your audience got them all right. All of those are very good suggestions. Green hydrogen is definitely something that we see from our country. It's part of our hydrogen plan, both green and blue. And we are going to look at both because both are available to us and both can allow us to lower emissions now. This is urgent. There is no question. That is why Canada, if you look at the list of things that's happening in that word cloud, we're doing just about everything. And incumbent upon that, I should add, in terms of the marketplace, and Secretary Kerry is absolutely right about them being involved, we have a national price on pollution, a price on carbon. Politically, I can tell you that is not easy, but we did it because that is a very, very essential instrument in harnessing the marketplace and making sure that it makes the right decisions.
Thank you very much. Let me go now to Commissioner Simpson and ask you, clearly it's not only North America that faces challenges around the public acceptance of the energy transition, but also Europe as well. How do we ensure that decarbonization does not further disadvantage the most vulnerable and therefore lead some member countries to essentially drag their feet?
Well, first of all, we want to send the signal that green means growth. Green projects create more jobs, bring in more money and save more than non-green projects. So the clean energy sector is expected to be among the most active employers in the coming years. Every billion euro of investment that we will attract in renewable hydrogen will create 10,000 jobs along the supply chain, according to our estimates. And similarly, with solar power, we are aiming to generate 400,000 new direct and indirect jobs along the entire industrial value chain. And at the same time, in several parts of Europe, solar power or onshore wind have become the cheapest form of electricity generation. In addition, energy efficiency and renewables help reduce the EU's dependency on fossil fuel imports. And thus, our import bill, while creating domestic jobs, will change. And this is a clear win-win for the economy. But that said, some loss of jobs will be inevitable. And that's the way it has been with every industrial revolution in history. But the difference this time is that we will be ready for it. And this is a transition of our own making. And because we are ready for it, we are committing to a just transition where no one is left behind, no worker, no region, and we will support the most vulnerable. We have developed valuable expertise with our coal regions in transition initiative. Based on this experience, we have just launched a new initiative with several industrial partners. And also we are promoting this just transition program in our neighboring countries, in their coal regions, in Western Balkans and Ukraine, so that transition towards a carbon neutral economy will take place there too. And the initiative will provide financial support for transition activities to our neighbors too. And furthermore, we are ready to engage through the International Energy Agency to develop solutions for the regions worldwide that are most affected. And I firmly believe that phasing out coal and transitioning to a green energy system will be much easier if we share our experiences and also lessons learned. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And last word back to John Kerry. And you did, of course, in your keynote, talk about green jobs and the enormous potential there. So let me ask you a slightly different question about the domestic situation in the US. It does, of course, remain a deeply polarized country. You've got a very, very narrow majority in Congress. So talk to us a little bit about the degree to which the US can be a reliable transatlantic partner going forward. There is, of course, quite a bit of concern in Europe that the pendulum could swing again in the other direction. So perhaps you could speak to that before we close this very, very thought-provoking panel.
Well, even with Donald Trump there, and he made the decision to get out of the Paris Agreement, even as he did that, 37 governors and the District of Columbia, so 38 entities, said, no, we're staying in. Those 38 entities, states, Republican and Democrat, represent 80% of the population of America. And 1,000 plus mayors in the United States all said, we're staying in. The day after Donald Trump pulled out, lying to the American people about why he was pulling out and what the rationale was for it, i.e. too much of a burden. It wasn't a burden on anybody. because we all wrote our own plans in Paris. Everybody wrote their own plan. That's not, we had ExxonMobil and major corporations in Paris helping to write that. So the fact is that the vast majority of America's economy, the vast majority of our political entities all stayed in Paris. Donald Trump may have gotten out, but we stayed in. So this is an exaggerated notion. Did it hurt? Yeah, it hurt. Even though we were, kept fighting and going along. I remember the day after Trump pulled out, Governor Cuomo, Governor Inslee of Washington, Governor Brown of California, and I stood up in New York and we said, we're going to fight to stay in. We have a "we're still in" movement in the United States. So people shouldn't sit around worrying about what happens for the second reason. And the second reason is this: the kind of investment that's going to take place in the trillions of dollars, the new opportunities that we've just been describing, new technologies, new jobs, we have 3.6 million people today working in advanced energy technology in the United States. That's more people than are working in retail. It's twice as many people as are working in hotels, and it's 3 times as many people who are working in oil and coal. This is the future. And no politician is going to come along in a year, 2 years, 3 years, and possibly be able to turn around what major corporate enterprises across the world and governments are going to commit to. Now, that comes to the first part of the question the others were addressing, which is how do you make it fair? Well, we've built tragically, and we in America are suffering. This is where our anger comes from. This is why you see our country polarized. You have different views about what to do about it, but everybody's angry because they know the system has been unfair. They know that globalization made this vast wealth for a lot of people, but workers are working harder than ever to make ends meet, harder to pay the bills, send your kid to school, do all those kinds of things, which are fundamental to everybody's good feelings or bad feelings about government anywhere in the world. And the fact is that in too many places, there wasn't, and particularly in our country, Europe does better on this scale than we've done, though up until President Biden passed his COVID relief. $1.9 trillion is going to lift children out of poverty. I think it's something like 25, 30%, maybe higher, of kids automatically lifted out of poverty from that legislation. People are going to get $1,400 in their pockets to pay off some bills and buy the groceries and survive COVID more effectively. That is what changes attitudes, and that is what effectively builds the fabric of societies in our countries. And the truth is that people haven't paid enough attention to that in the last years. That's why you have this national populism growing in Europe and other places in the world. But if governments are paying attention, and that's why people are fighting for justice in this environmental transformation. That you got to make sure that you're doing this in a way that's fair. But if you can earn a fair wage and you're doing better, there are going to be massive job opportunities here, folks. In America, we don't even have a national grid. In the age of artificial intelligence and quantum computing, we can't send electrons from one part of the country to another in order to be efficient in our distribution of energy. This is what's going to come with this transformation. And there are all kinds of jobs: steel workers, iron workers, pipe fitters, electricians, construction of all kinds. Massive amount of work is going to be done as we rebuild our societies and retool to this challenge. That's why I said, and I believe deeply, this is the greatest economic transformation moment that we have seen, bigger than the 1990s when we had computers and telephone, portable phones and so forth. This is bigger. This is about moving billions of people. It's about how you heat billions of people. This is and power our homes and our, what kind of engines will fly our aircrafts? What kind of fuel will they use? Every sector of every economy in the world is going to be positively impacted, providing their leadership gets them into, as we've been saying, the game. And I think that's part of what Glasgow is about, getting a unified planet, 196 plus countries signing on to this future. It's exciting, I think.
Thank you very, very much, John Kerry, for those inspiring final words to this panel. Game's on. Thank you very much, Minister O'Regan, Commissioner Simpson, for being with us. Unfortunately, Peter Altmaier had to leave us for an important meeting, but we're very grateful to all of you for this truly energizing discussion that we have had.